Well, welcome everybody to episode 1 of EdTechWorld Language. If we haven't met, my name is Meredith White, and I was a Spanish teacher, and I am now an instructional technology and instructional coach support person in Gwinnett County Public Schools in Metro Atlanta. Episode 1 is going to look back, sort of back at technology, then present at technology, and forward at technology in the world language classroom. And it's going to be full of reflections. My special guest is Tim Eagan, the one and only. And Tim, will you tell us, for those who don't know you, which is 0 people, but for those who don't know you, will you tell us where you are and what you do?
Sure. I am the department head for Wellesley Public Schools, 6 to 12, which Wellesley's just outside of Boston. I've been in this role for 15 years. I've been in education for over 30 years, if you can believe that. And I agreed to come on and talk about technology because from my position as a district leader, I have a lot to think about around technology needs and uses.
Absolutely. And I think your perspective is so important as a teacher, as a district supervisor, as an often, presenting person, an oft presenter. So there's a lot that's rolled up into technology, and I appreciate your experience and your perspective. For me, it's always been a piece of my teaching, and it's become more and more significant. And now it's a very significant piece of my new role. So when you look back at your experience, what would you say? What have you seen? Well, let's go present before that. What do you see when you think technology as technology's place or role in the world language classroom?
Sure. When I think about technology and world languages, I like to go to ACTFL and to look and see what they have to say, right? And so ACTFL has a position statement on technology and the role of technology in learning. And they say a few very important things. Their piece is long, but I will break it down to just a few main points. They warn against isolated use of technology for acquiring language, right? Language requires interaction. It's a social constructivist phenomenon. And so we need people, we need interaction with people. So we can't use technology in isolation. We want to think about content knowledge, research informed teaching strategies. No matter what we do, whether it's with technology or without technology, it's always important to pause and think about, are these practices research-based strategies or are they not? Technology is not the goal all by itself. That's a pitfall if we use technology just because we want to use technology. And so ACTFL has a lot more to say. And if we have the opportunity to post a link, we can post a link to the ACTFL position statement, which might be useful to listeners.
So I think, for me, the significant part of that, I think all of that's significant, but it's the fact that technology is a part of effective teaching. I mean, it has to be. It's 2024, and I would say the same thing about rubrics, and I would say the same thing about textbooks if that's part of it. Part of a person's equation, or if you don't have them but you use novels instead, or just anything is a tool. And I think it's really easy, like you said, it's such a pitfall just to totally rely on technology or have it isolated, not in context, and just kind of for technology's sake. I don't know if you would say the same from both your experience, but also your experience supervising.
Absolutely. When I look, so I spend a lot of time in teacher classrooms, and a lot of my role is around coaching teachers. And we ask the question all the time. And again, this is the question we ask: whether the teacher is using technology or not. What's your purpose? What's your learning target? What's your progression with that learning target? I think a useful framing here is to consider the distinction between an exercise, an activity, and a task. And Van Patten as well as Henshaw and Hawkins have nice definitions of distinguishing between exercise and task. Van Patten says that exercises focus on grammar or mechanics, and they're not in context. And tasks, on the other hand, the goal is not really related to the language practice. The goal or outcome is something that's beyond the language. So the language just becomes a tool. And so we can ask in the classroom, if you're using technology, pick any random, let's pick a game technology, and I'll mention a few things because, we're not here to sell any products or to say one game platform is better than the other. But let's think about some of the popular ones like Gimkit or Kahoot. There are ways to think about how you're writing questions with either of those platforms, or any platform like that, where you're making what you're doing a task, where there's negotiation of meaning and the goal is beyond the language. I like what Maris, Hawkins, and Florencia Henshaw say about tasks. And they say that tasks involve a communicative exchange focused on meaning, and that learners need to understand each other, and the goal is non-linguistic, right? That's the important thing about a task. So we can take any piece of technology and we're not always doing tasks. Sometimes we're doing things that are a little bit more, there are some fundamentals that you might be doing that are not specifically tasks, but we want the focus, we want the weight of what we're doing to be negotiation of meaning in the classroom, right? So we might think of, like, if you have Gimkit, there's an option to have text input questions where the answer is text input, and you can say, you can give a couple of keywords, and as long as the response has that keyword in it, then it's a correct response. In WordWall, now these are both things that you pay for, right? And so I'm conscious that not everybody has a tech budget, but in WordWall, which is something that we use in our district, you have audio options, and the audio in several languages, so you can enter words and then click on the audio and click on Spanish or French or whatever the language is, and then you can play activities that way.
Yeah. No, those are great. Gosh, I love WordWall. And I love Gimkit, and just those are, and Kahoot, just all of them. They can seem so similar. So I'll also link those in here as well, because they all can seem similar, or it's really easy to just look at them and think, oh, vocabulary input or whatever. But like you said, with some tweaking and some forethought. So I will also say too, we've all seen the end of class clock, and you're like, oh my goodness, we have 15 minutes left. Like, we're just gonna play some Gimkit, and that is totally fine. You got to do what you got to do.
I will never shame a teacher who
No.
says, I wrote a lesson plan. Either we did everything that we intended to do, or we were doing some things and something fell apart. And
Yep.
I need, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And jump on. In fact, I've had this conversation with teachers, and let's be clear, because in my role, I supervise and evaluate. And I've had conversations with teachers where you could see something fell apart and they jumped onto a game site, and we had a nice conversation about it, and their response was, I needed to save the day and have the kids engaged, and I in the moment I had 15 seconds to make a decision on what am I doing, because for whatever reason this thing we were doing fell apart. And so that happens, and teachers are human beings, and teaching is hard.
Absolutely. Even when you feel like you're at your least effective, or when you feel like you're like, wow, that lesson really stunk, even that is exhausting. Like being not your best teacher self is exhausting. It's not just like, oh, I'm at the top of my game that's exhausting. It's just every day, and constantly getting more things put onto our plates doesn't help. And sometimes that thing getting put on our plate is technology, and is a new tool or a new, catch-all. Sometimes you just need 10 minutes of Gimkit, and like, that's just what we're doing. And I'm so thankful for experience And within that experience, all of the tools that I have compiled over the years, like I look at how many, because you can populate Gimkit and Blookit sets for two examples from Quizlet. I'm so thankful for all the Quizlet sets that I have just from over the years, because I can just, even if I need to make a new set for a Gimkit or a new game, I can just go boop, and it's a few clicks, it's a few buttons, rock and roll. I didn't realize that until I had a student teacher a couple of years ago. And he would just sort of like, I'd say, well, we could play a game, or we could, do this, throwing out suggestions. And I didn't even think why he was kind of blank staring, looking back at me. And then I thought, oh my gosh, it's because you have so much. And he can't even conceptualize, okay, sure, play the game. That's no problem. Do I need an account? Where do I get the questions? Like, it just was step one. And I was like, man, I am super thankful for that. One of
Yeah.
my favorite Gimkit hacks is if you have like true false questions, cierto, falso. What is it in French? What's true false?
Vrai faux.
Ah, muy faux. So if you have like your cierto, your falso, your vrai, your faux, your yes, no. I also love a good logical, illogical question,
Mhm.
because then there's a lot of context there. It's not just like, how do you say hairbrush? It's like, I brush my teeth with a hairbrush. That's not a great example because it is the same word for brush in Spanish, but you get what I'm saying. Or I eat my breakfast with my hairbrush. And when you have a Quizlet set that has throughout the cards, like the other side, one whole side, like one whole column of cards, whether it's the answer, right? It's the one you flip over to see. If you only have two options, Gimkit will detect that and only give you two buttons. So that's really cool if people haven't played that. So you can have just, they're not looking then throughout at all four. They're just looking at lógico, ilógico, cierto, falso, sí, no, that kind of thing. And that's kind of fun. So really thinking about what you're putting in those sets, what the task is, what you want them
And
to
that
know.
when you have that sort of binary, that true, false, or logical, illogical, that actually can be a nice way to think about using one of these game platforms as vocabulary building. Because I
Hmm.
think one of the
Yeah.
pitfalls, one of the mistakes that's easy to make as a teacher is to load a bunch of vocabulary. The games go so fast. We have a lot of learners who are not really processing, and so the game is great for kids
Hmm.
with like strong, quick working memory.
Yep.
But for kids who don't have strong working memory, those games can be really frustrating. And if we break them down in a different kind of way, like only two buttons, right?
Hmm.
Something that's that much clearer, that
Yeah.
allows them to make some more form meaning connection, or association with a vocabulary word, can actually be a stronger, a more pedagogically sound choice.
Absolutely. And giving them, it gives them a little bit more of a chance. I think we so often reward those fast processors, those quick talkers, or, it's like a speech or a debate or some of those things that maybe don't, that have stylistic components, not just what's being said. And suddenly you realize this person's just a really gifted orator,
Yeah.
but maybe not saying the thing, same thing. Some kids learn how to kind of play the game quite literally. And I think it's a little bit, yeah, a little bit of thought, and those tools become noticeably more powerful.
Right. Flippity is a really strong tool, right, with a
Mhm.
lot of options, and it's free.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I really like about a tool like that is the ability to have to, you download a spreadsheet, then you enter your information there. It's easy then to go back to that same spreadsheet and grab that vocabulary or those questions and answers and upload them into another platform, right? You
Mhm.
just sort of, you name everything carefully, and you save your spreadsheets from Flippity, and you can use them for lots of other purposes, other technologies that you might have access to.
Yeah, that's really true. Well, and like you said, it's the naming, it's the saving. I think that's also a battle with technology in the world language classroom, but just in life is, what did I call that? Where did I put that? Where did and so thinking about, I'm probably going to be able to use this later. I should call it, not, I'll use these slides next year. I probably shouldn't name them August 15th, because next year it's not going to be August 15th, and that kind of thing. I've made that
Absolutely.
mistake before.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that saving, because one of the other, I think, roles of technology is for a department to curate all of the resources, whether they're curriculum resources. We have a shared Google Drive,
Mm.
and we have all these different folders. We're lucky in the district to have a curriculum team, and their focus is on making sure the curriculum is being written, activities are being written and shared, resources are being developed and saved. And we came up with some naming conventions so that
Hmm.
if you're teaching French 4 or Spanish 4, Unit 3, Part 3, you go in and you know that the naming convention is FR4 space U3 space P3. So you can always find it by, and this very simple formula for every language, every unit. And you can find things related to that unit by doing a search because you know what that naming convention is. And so while there are folders upon folders upon folders, all
Man.
sort of stuck in together, uh, it's easy to do a search because we've named everything consistently, and because we're fortunate to have a team of teachers who have dedicated time during the workday to
Yeah.
make sure things are named. So if you create something, you send it to the curriculum team, they're going to make sure it's named according to our naming convention.
It's a great process too. Like as a team, I'm thinking, man, how much time would have been saved, on different teams over the years. I think we all have some file somewhere that's just called like Ronnie, Unit 3.2
Yeah.
quiz. No, for copies. Really, this one, I swear. I mean, there's like narrative in the file line because somebody shared it with you. You don't even work with Ronnie anymore. She's moved to a different school. It's not even like, and it's just sitting in your shared with me or wherever. And you're like, what even is this?
Yes. One of the search functions that I like in Google is that search function where you can say contains. So I
Mm,
can't remember the name of something, but I know it has the word bolígrafo in it or whatever, and I can say, find me all the documents that have the word bolígrafo and were last edited between X date and X date. So that advanced search function
mm,
is a lifesaver, because I'm particularly guilty about not I name things well, but I'm really guilty about not stopping and moving things into
mm.
folders, because I'm making something and I say I'll move it into the folder later. Well, later is, the superintendent's called a meeting in 15 minutes and wants XYZ information from Power School. Please download a report. Like, okay, so that ship has sailed, right?
Okie dokie. Too late.
Never, and then 3 years later, that's still just sort of floating around
Yeah.
Google Drive somewhere.
That's so true. One of my favorite people, and absolutely my favorite digital organizer is Lisa McHarg out of Nebraska. And she was a Spanish teacher for years and left the classroom and now does professional digital organizing. And a lot of it pertains to world language teachers because there aren't just worksheets and slides and whatever. There's audio files, there's video files. You have a large course team. There's stuff in other languages, there's stuff with certain vocabulary. Maybe they're teaching calcetines and not medias. And I mean,
Yeah.
what we do is so complex. And that would be those advanced search options are super, super nice. And just being able to filter down, like you said, just at least pare down and not feel like you're staring at all
Yeah,
the possible files that you could be looking for, but it's still not the one.
absolutely. And I really encourage people to use those. I'm often, when I'm working with teachers and they can't find something, I'm
Mhm.
surprised that they haven't even paid attention that that
No.
advanced search function is there. And they're so pleasantly surprised that this thing that's right there is makes their life so much easier.
No, that's super true. Maybe you know what? I might steal that and make that my tech tip for next week for my colleagues because I try to send out one a week, and yeah, I totally forget that that goes neglected by some people. But then if they're working alongside me, they go, "Oh gosh, you're just so fast." And I have to kind of, I always kind of pause because I'm like, yes, I do type quickly, which is an advantage. And I pretty much remember what I've called things and I can find a keyword and I am really fast, but I'm also utilizing some of those baked in features like the advanced search and like my bookmarks are really efficient. I'm really good at that. And my folders I'm pretty good at. I also use Shift Z a lot to put things in multiple folders. Like that's so nice. And so all those shortcuts. So I can pretty much locate anything. And I have to tell people, I think they think it's just age, but I also think they think I'm younger than I am. And I'm not sure why that is. So it's just kind of like ambiguous. And they go, oh, you're so lucky. You're so good at that. And I always remind them, it's right there, like click on that once in a while, click around and find out. I know that's not the phrase, but it's like true. It's like just click on it. You can't break Google. So just click around in your drive. Pretty much everything's recoverable and findable. And there's very little you can do that's like, that's it. It's gone forever.
Sure. A teacher came to me once. They had deleted like a whole folder of a year's worth of work and in tears. And I said, don't worry. Click, click, click. Here it is. It's like it's just in the trash. There.
It's right here. It's like you just threw it in the garbage in your kitchen. It's like when you cook something. I know you and I cook a lot, and it's like when you cook something and you read it and you go, okay, 35 minutes at 4:50. You throw the box away, and then 10 minutes later you come back and you got to get the box out of the trash. You're like, what did that say? Like I told myself I was going to remember, but I don't. I mean, yeah, it's like it's just right there in the trash. It didn't go anywhere. Even, I mean, yeah, even documents have. You can see who messed something up. There's make a copy, which is my favorite. When people do that or just force a copy. I know you and I have talked about that before. There's so many tools that I think are empowering. And that's actually a great segue because I was going to ask you kind of a surprise question that leads into my next question. Do you feel that things in the world language classroom, especially because students do need to record and they do, you do need to hear them. There's a performance aspect. You need to read their writing and we want those things as fast and efficient as possible and as interesting, frankly. Do you think over the years you've seen a shift from who's using the technology? Because we've mentioned a few things like the games that are like in the teacher's hands, but for students and for practice and maybe even for a little bit of input, like for some learning purposes. But then also the organizing side of just keeping all your stuff together in one place. That's also kind of technology in the teacher hands. Have you seen that shift where even though we have more than ever now, technology is maybe more or less in students' hands? And what do you think about that? Like who's using it and what are some of those best uses and for
Oh
whom?
my gosh, you've asked such a complex question. Is this a 3-hour podcast?
I was gonna say, and how much time do you have?
Uh, what if I sort of think back to the beginnings of now we've always had technology, right? I guess
Mhm.
technically you could say a pencil is technology, right?
Right.
I think back to the days when I began and they were like overhead projectors.
Hmm.
In the beginning days, the technology was really in the hands of the teacher. Even when smart boards, interactive boards became common in classrooms, in the hands of teachers. We've shifted to a place where kids, often many schools, kids bring their own laptop or they have Chromebooks issued by the school or iPads or tablets. Uh, some schools that allow phones. Phones are a challenge and phones are a
Huge.
tool.
Yeah.
Sometimes the student phone in the classroom can be really great for certain purposes.
Mhm.
And I think the challenge goes back to our first question of what's the purpose of the technology? What's the learning goal? What's the language goal? And how do we navigate that? And there's the challenge with how do you get kids to put their devices away and not make it a fight? I don't have the answers for that.
Mhm.
But I mean, I have some answers. And I recognize that I know some of my colleagues have classes with 35 or more kids in
Mhm.
them. It's a lot harder to say to kids, hey, phones away and give them the teacher eye when there are
Mhm.
40 of those, cherubs sitting in front of you than when you have 20, right? Or in
Absolutely.
some cases, people have fewer. Um, and also a case of relationship building, right? It's easier to do really good relationship building with 20 kids than it is with 40
Mhm.
kids. That's right. That's just the reality. And so, yeah, there's a lot of technology out there. And sometimes the best technology is paper and pencil,
Mhm.
right? And like, let's put it everything away. And if we're lucky enough to have the right recipe, we can sometimes get kids to forget they even have a phone.
Right. Yeah, I had a friend not too far back go, "Meredith, you've changed." Because I talked about writing, just writing with pencil and paper, and I was like, "I've always been a writing with pencil and paper. I've never had students, type their Spanish work. I wanted to use the writing paper with the numbered lines, and I wanted to, I want to see their quantity, I want to see their quality. I also want to be able to take it easily, put it in my bag, take it home, even if I'm just going to ignore it when I get home, as one does. I want to at least have something to like have with me. I want to write notes on it. I like that tangible
Yeah.
piece. And I think your experience and what you're mentioning is exactly, it's been mine. We've focused a lot on technology in the teacher hands. It's shifted a lot, but then we're also now kind of coming back and looking at it a little bit differently, realizing whereas even 10 years ago I would have been pro phone in the classroom, like woohoo, they can play this game, they can use it as a controller. But really, smartphones were still young-ish. Not every student had one, so it wasn't super equitable now in retrospect. So, there were obstacles there, and it's just hard now. Now that most all of them, I can't think of a single student of mine that doesn't have a smartphone. I mean, maybe a flip phone if they're like grounded or something, or like on punishment. But
Yeah.
or they don't even pull it out of their backpack. That truly is like a phone for emergencies. They're like, no, I'm not doing that.
We don't want
But
anyone to see it.
no, no, zero people. They'd rather say it's broken or something, or lost, or like their parents took it away, not replaced it with, this thing. But
And there's some research around the different cognitive processing that happens when you're writing with a pencil rather than
Mhm.
typing on a keyboard, right? When you're forming letters. And I'm going to give a shout out to a German teacher at the high school, Devin Ellis, yay Devin,
Mhm.
because she does this all of her students. She has all of her students write by hand, and
Mhm.
then she has to upload them to our learning management system.
Mhm.
We happen to use Canvas
Mhm.
uh, in our district. They upload it, and I don't remember what app she uses, but she has a particular app that she really likes. And then, so the students are doing the writing by hand. They're not on a device until they're uploading it. And then she uses an Apple Pencil, and she's able to give feedback through Canvas. And she says she uses the iPad, which is a lot better a tool
Yeah. It's
in,
smaller.
and smaller. And it has I guess it has some different functions when you open Canvas and you're grading and giving feedback than a laptop does. And she says it is the most amazing way to give really solid targeted feedback and do it pretty quickly. Uh,
Wow.
and so they're writing by hand, but she's using the technology to
Mm.
do the grading, which she says is so convenient for her, and then giving students the feedback. And then there's an opportunity for this feedback loop.
Yeah. Well, and it's saved somewhere. So I'm also a big fan of like save your papers. But imagine if you lost that paper, but I still had that artifact, in somewhere else, like in Canvas or wherever, which is super, super cool and easy to share with parents or whoever.
Right.
It's really cool. What a fun, that's, to me, that would
Yeah.
be the sweet spot. Like I get to use, and again, I know that's technology and teachers in the teacher's hands, but I get to use the things I'm comfortable with. I get to use my device, but I also get to work smart with
Yeah.
my LMS, and I get to, I was already going to grade their writing, obviously. So yeah, no, that's really awesome.
Right.
Um,
Working smart,
it's
because
great.
we can use we have to think about what are the ways that the technology is going to make our lives easier.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes it's just technology for technology's sake. Like, how can I monitor behavior? How can I put, for me, that's just better done on a printed roster. Like, I'm not going to download some app that says that I can, do this, this, that, and the other. Like, I can just print a roster and have my own codes, and it's nobody's business what number 4 means, but, maybe that means, like, was on their phone for half of class or needs to finish their speaking assessment, like, whatever it is. But to me, some of those things are better. We overthink
Yeah,
the use of technology, I think, sometimes. Um, what are so not, the things that do hit that sweet spot and we don't overthink or underthink, what are some of your favorite tools to use for world language teaching or assessing or all of the above?
sure. We mentioned a couple of them already.
Mhm.
I Flippity is absolutely one of my favorites. One of the functions you have is a spelling quiz kind of activity where there's practice and then like quiz yourself and then that quiz where you sit where if the teacher enters an email
Mhm.
and when the student is done the spelling gets the results get sent to the teacher's email. And what I love about the spelling is that you can there I forget how many languages there are in Flipperty, but there are maybe a couple dozen.
Mhm.
Certainly, the majority of languages that we teach in schools that have an alphabet, right? Because we certainly teach languages that don't have an alphabet. Many languages are there, and then you can hear the word pronounced. So if you're doing in Spanish, it says, you know, um, first it gives you the word bolígrafo, and then it spells
Mhm.
it out, B-O, and then you click on the next activity, and it says deletrea, bolígrafo,
Mhm.
and then the students spell it. Now, we can argue about how important is spelling, and I think there's a time and a place. I think there's a level. Like I'm not going to worry a lot about a lot of spelling with my novice learners.
Mhm.
Some things I'm going to worry about spelling. I'm not ever at any level going to completely dismiss spelling.
Mhm.
And I think even if you're a teacher who will say to learners, I don't care how it's spelled as long as you're communicating a message. I say, great, all the power to you. And I say that sincerely,
Mhm.
not sarcastically. And at the same time, we can say to learners, I still want you to practice spelling,
Mhm.
even though I'm not going to test you on spelling,
Right.
right?
Right.
And then the multimodal where there's the AI generated spelling of the letters and pronunciation of the word, which is pretty good pronunciation. That multimodal uh, facet is good for kids. We know that multimodal learning like that increases achievement, right? Increases the
Mhm.
potential for achievement. So
Yeah.
Flippity is one of my favorites because there's so many options because
So
it's
good.
free. Uh, and when I write to the creator and I say, "Hey, this didn't work or that didn't work," I always get a response, and I think
Mm.
who is this amazing human being who has created this free tool for teachers and isn't making, so that I know of, isn't making any money and responds. I do love word wall. I will say, and I want to repeat because I have said my district's name. Like I'm not advertising for the company. Um, I want to be clear and ethical about that. But I do
Mhm.
think it's a great tool. And I at the same time I recognize there are districts where teachers are told there's no money for any of
Mm.
these, can't have it, right?
Right. Or they're blocked. That's the other thing is you pay your own money and then you get to school and you can't even use it.
Right. Uh, when I think about using technology, especially games like Gimkit, Kahoot, etc., I also like to. One of my favorite things to do is think of structured input, whatever that technology is. And for those who might not be familiar with the idea of structured input, it's input that's designed to help students focus on how words are put together, how meaning is put together, and it encourages paying attention to patterns and rules of a language without doing this really explicit grammar
Mhm.
instruction, right? And that quote, I didn't really say a quote, I sort of blundered through it, but that's from Leon Van Patten's Making Communicative Language Teaching Happen,
Mm.
which I think at this point is 20 years old or more.
Yeah.
And so they have some guidance for how do you do a structured input activity, present one thing at a time, keep meaning in focus as opposed to grammar, right? It's about meaning. Move from sentence to connected discourse, use both oral and written input, have learners do something with the input, and keep learner processing strategies in mind. So we can go back and think about how can we use flippity. For example, there's a breakout room where students have to answer a question, then it unlocks that, and then you can have a clue to
Mhm.
go on to the next thing. All kinds of really cool things, and you can really do a structured input activity with something like that. So I love that.
Yeah. Well, and again, it takes that forethought, which is, take some time to get to where you're not like, oh my gosh, what are we doing tomorrow? If it's just like, oh, can we play Gimkit? And all it is just identify vocabulary. Again, been there. No shame in that game. But it's once you leverage some of those things and you think about it in terms of like, is this valuable input? Like, what do I want them to take from this? And how is this going? How can they use this? Um, there's a way to pretty much manipulate anything you have to do, as I put it in air quotes there, or anything you want to do, really, to be able to fit that and to fit a language goal that makes sense in terms of like language use. It's like that thing where people say you're going to have to communicate, not just conjugate. Yes, I subscribe to that. Like, I agree. And also, you can only not conjugate or misconjugate so far before people get
Right,
confused. So if we're going
right.
to do a Quizlet that's identifying first person singular, first person plural, como comemos. Maybe you've had students say like comamos, comamos. They start just making all sorts of most things, and you want them to see bailamos, comemos, like what's the difference? That can be super valuable because no, they won't have to conjugate, but students do, by and large, I have found, appreciate patterns. Even if there are rules that break the rules and all that kind of stuff, they appreciate somewhere to start instead of just, whatever you say is good enough, just get
Mhm.
close. That
Right.
can be really disconcerting for some learners and being like, what do you mean just get close enough?
It can be, and we want to, at every level, we want to help learners make form meaning connection,
Hmm.
right? And so we can use some of these tools to do that, and we want to progress them through what's referred to as conceptual control of a language structure,
Hmm.
to partial control of a language structure, to full control of a
Hmm.
language structure. And in order to be an advanced user of language, you need, for at least for high frequency structures, you need to have full control. Full
Mm.
control doesn't mean you're perfect, you never make an error, but it means you have no major patterns of error. It means there's not linguistic
Right.
breakdown when
Hmm.
you're communicating an idea with that. And so we do, like, there's accuracy becomes important, and we have to always consider the role of accuracy. I don't think it should ever drive
Right.
the conversation, but it's important. And this is one of the places when people move to a really powerful proficiency orientation. One of the questions that people remain stuck on is, well, what about the grammar? What about accuracy? And how do we really fit that in? And what does the research say? And the reality is, there's some research that points us in some directions, and there's a lot we do not know.
I think that was weird. I froze for a second there. I think yeah, like there is a lot that we don't know. And we also can't predict every language situation our students are going to be in. So, how many times have you said, oh, they don't say that in insert thing here, or you'll never need blah blah blah. I just don't know that we can say that. So it's like, and they're like you said, they're only going to get so far. I always think of language like a car, and I'll tell students like you using the word breakdown is exactly what I do too. I'm like, you're going to be on the side of the highway in a second if you don't do. And again, I think of it like the car, like the mechanics and the maintenance to keep that car running. I don't need you to know everything about the ins and outs in your car, but I'm a better car owner when I know how to change my own oil. I know how to change my own tires. Like, I know enough to be a little bit dangerous and pretty competent. and I know when things are going wrong, and I know when I'm about to be on the side of the highway. I think language is very similar. We just can't discount that form definitely plays a role.
Yeah, it does.
And technology can help with some of that form that isn't just sort of the historic, sort of the legacy, like drill and kill and all that kind of thing. We can spice it up at the very least and pop it into some interesting ways that isn't as kind of, miserable as it once was, and still is for some people, but at least maybe we can reduce the pain a little bit.
Right, right. So not exactly a favorite, but something I'm fascinated by is AI. And I can't call it a favorite because I'm at the same time really frightened by it
Mhm.
and fascinated by it and excited about the possibilities. And I don't know what it means for the future of like kids learning.
Mhm.
uh, I have some questions about it. I have some concerns, but there are some great tools. So one tool that I played with a little bit is called Diffit, Diffit.
Yeah.
And all I've done so far is played with it to see if I can generate some things. You can put in, you know, I wanted you can find so you can find an article on whatever topic. You can upload it to Diffit either with a URL or a cut and paste, and you can say, okay, the language is German,
Mhm.
and I want it at a third grade reading level, and
Mhm.
it will change. So then we get into the debate: authentic, inauthentic, authentic,
Hmm.
adapted, right? Um, is it Florencia Henshaw who I think on her YouTube channel we should also put a link to her
Mhm.
YouTube channel. I think it's Florencia who has one of her YouTube episodes on authentic, inauthentic, or
Mhm.
adapted
I think you're
teacher made
right. Yeah,
texts.
I think it was her. Mhm.
And she basically says the research says there can be a time and a place for both.
Absolutely.
And right, and so don't just say either or, but
Mhm.
think about again what's your goal, what's your purpose, right? I think
Yeah.
there's a danger in saying we never use authentic texts,
Mhm.
right? And so Diffit can be I think has the potential to be a really great tool. Plus you take that text, you click a button, you say generate activities. It has, it will choose vocabulary for you, definitions in the
Mm.
target language. You might look at those and say, actually, those aren't the words that I need to target, and you can edit and add or remove vocabulary words. It will give you Frayer model vocabulary activities, which are great. And you can sort of play around with those and have students really dig into some vocabulary learning with I love the Frayer model, which if you teach anybody who teaches elementary is very familiar with that. All kinds of activity options. And so now again, I've only played with it to see what can it do, but I've
Mhm.
created some activities that I think are pretty interesting and viable for the classroom in 5 minutes
Mhm.
or less. And so I think Diffit is, and I know, so it's free for me right now. I think
Mhm.
it might be a trial period that I have. I don't remember the pricing structure if it's free for at some level for a long time or whatever. But that's a real, I'm fascinated by that and by other AI tools.
Yeah, that's a good question because I'm trying to remember now. I too have an account, and I'm like, I definitely didn't pay for it. It must still be free. Yeah, it must still be free.
Right.
I
And I've
probably did it in November, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. So
Mhm.
I did as well because I think it was on
Mhm.
Cult to Pedagogy
Mhm.
where I learned about it. Another link we need to put in because every
Mhm.
year Jennifer Gonzalez does a technology episode.
Yeah.
Really worth it. But I've also used Chat GPT. So a
Mhm.
Latin teacher at the middle school was saying, "Oh, I want to come up with this game with in Latin about gods and goddesses. We're doing a unit and it's Friday before vacation. And I would love a game that's entirely in Latin
Mhm.
because you're trying to move away from just doing the Latin grammar and doing a little bit more of, oral and communicative Latin. So I went into Chat GPT. She said, I'm going to try to do this during my lunch break. And the class doesn't meet till after lunch. I've got a couple hours. And I went into Chat GPT and I said, write me 25 questions. I think I said 25 true false questions about Latin gods and goddesses in Latin. Boop.
Boop, done.
Done. And within a second or 2 seconds, I had 25 questions and cut, paste, email them. Here you go, middle school Latin teacher. And she said, how did you do that? And I said, I just know things.
That's right. I have connections, baby. Stick with me. Stick with me, hon.
Goose.
I know stuff. I know Magic AI is really cool too. CurryPod is neat and it'll make slides for like there's just so many. Another link that I'll put in is my and Claudia Elliott's Actful presentation, which was AI in the world language classroom. So you're reminding me to do that too. I'll say it out loud. It's bit.ly/world language AI. Everything's capitalized, like not everything. Uppercase W, uppercase L, and then A and I are both capitalized because it's case sensitive. But yeah, there's so many tools out there. And ChatGPT will also do a great table. A lot of my ELL colleagues have used, like, it's not just a narrative or listing. You can say, put the following, words and their Russian, because we have a couple of new students from Russia, Russian translations in a table because these students arrived and like 3 days later had to take like map testing and do all this like standardized stuff. And they were like, no, they don't speak any English. So they were quick, like translating things to Russian.
The alphabet is different.
Yes, absolutely. And it's like, what are they going to do? Right. This isn't, and it's not like math where like math's math, in a lot of places, like, no, they're taking like content. So they were content aware, but they suddenly needed to like, kind of translate some stuff. And it was really cool for that. Anything as we wrap up here, anything that you see as a takeaway or advice in regards to the biggest obstacle you see or experience in, world language teaching in regards to technology?
Yes. So the first one is going back to everything you and I have talked about in this episode. There's so much stuff. It's easy to be overwhelmed. Yeah. And I think it's important to like find some things that interest you, find some things you want to play with and try out, and don't try all the things because you will completely go down a rabbit hole. And maybe if you want to go down that rabbit hole, then do it. But I think it's important to take a step back and say, I have the brain space for one thing, and I'm going to think about one thing and try it out with my kids and see what it looks like and try things twice. I forget, I was in a workshop recently. Oh, it was Matt Koss who was doing a workshop for MAFLA Winter Institute and winter workshops. I forget what they call them now. And he said, here's a thing, I want you to try it and try it twice because the first time it might not work well.
That's right.
So try it twice. So there's so much stuff. There are lots of authentic resources online, YouTube, online shopping, memes, news. Curate it, download it, whatever you can, whatever is copyright appropriate to download, and save it so that you're not trying to look for those same things and you can't remember where you found them, especially great images. Right, those are great. Another obstacle is budget, right? So you mentioned earlier in the podcast about paying your own money for things, right? That's a problem. You and I aren't going to solve that problem. It's frustrating that districts don't make sure they provide more money for teachers for things like this that are often really important tools. And that's a challenge.
Absolutely.
I also think there's not enough time for training, for giving teachers space to try things out with their colleagues. Right? I think sometimes we could just take department time, if you're lucky to have department meeting time, collaboration time, and say, here's a tool that I discovered. Let's play with it. And we have an hour, so let's play with it for 30 minutes. And then at 30 minutes, let's talk about how can we use this as a tool in our teaching, and let's all come up with a takeaway at the end of the hour so we can all try out this tool, right?
Hmm.
Just play with technology to discover some new things,
Yeah.
always with the focus of what's our goal and can we make teachers' lives easier with the
Hmm.
use of technology.
Well, absolutely. And making the tool work for us, not us work for the tool. If it's like taking forever to put in the questions and doing all this stuff. Like, I love that advice from Matt, who's incredible. And it's just like, yeah, that's fair. Try, like, take some time, but also be aware of how long it's taking you, to create a set or a module or a whatever the unit of measure is within the tool. And then try it a couple times, don't write it off right away, but then also if it doesn't serve you and you go, I just don't, if no one's going to collaborate on this with me, because let's say the rest of your course team goes, thanks but no thanks, that might be one to put on your to don't list. And I think
Yeah.
feeling the agency and like the empowerment to go, it's cute, I just don't have the bandwidth this year, and I'm just gonna, I picked one thing that I wanted to do, and I'm just gonna stick with that. For me, one year that was not Quizlet as a whole, but being really intentional with my Quizlet and getting within my account, which I, again, full disclaimer, like you said, naming and being ethical and all those kind of things, I always paid for myself. And now it's actually blocked in my district, like where students can't log in, with which of course, but, and I get it because there are some privacy concerns and I totally respect that. But it was really useful to me. And I spent an entire school year, little by little, building every level of Spanish into Quizlet. And I didn't teach every level, but I went little by little so that kids could look up and down the ladder, review from the previous level, but also look ahead because there's those go-getter kids too. And then once in a while, you'd have a teacher who would say, hey, I was looking over, such and such for unit 2. I didn't realize you guys taught that in level 2. And now we're coming full circle with that communication loop because we know in world language, in other contents too, but especially in world language, I think, especially if you change teachers, the students will not always be super truthful necessarily on what they did the previous
No.
year. And they're like, oh, no, Senor Egan, we did not speak Espanol last year with Senora Blanco. And you're going, yeah, I was there. Like, yes, you did, or it was with you. And they're like, no, we didn't hablar the Espanol. So I don't know any of this. And it's the first week of level 3 and they're, struggling and all those kind of things. Like, that's a very real, relatable experience. And even just by streamlining some of those Quizlet sets or our question library in our LMS, we have D2L. And I love D2L. I've used it for a long time, so I really know it inside and out. And so I think that's a big reason of why I like it, which is also a piece of that. Like, my district supports D2L, and it has, especially since COVID, we've unlocked / paid for some more features. I know Canvas, a lot of time I hear a lot of positive things about. So many different platforms. I'm not going to go looking for something else like audio recording, video recording. There's some great websites out there, but my LMS does that. So students can record that kind of response without me worrying about, will I be supported? What if it breaks? Does it cost money? Because the answer to all that is yes, call somebody, and no, and that's, to me, that's some peace of mind that in the past, when I've gone to Mathla or I've gone to Flag or I've gone to Actful and I've been super excited about a tool, I get back only to go, oh, wait a minute, the free trial's over. It's $10 a month, or it's $14.99
Or
a month, or
some
it's blocked.
companies won't sign student data privacy
That's right.
agreements, right?
Hmm.
And so we're in a district where if a company won't, and I'm not
Hmm.
going to name any companies, but there are some companies that we used to use that will not sign a data privacy agreement,
Yep.
and so they're off the table.
Same.
And
And
so you
we're
might go to a
humongous.
workshop, learn about this great thing, come back and say, I want this. Oh no, we asked them and they said they would not sign.
Yeah, it's frustrating. I now see it. I was always such a go-getter when it came to new tools, and now I'm a little more, I don't know if it's just getting older and just, with each passing year, I just get a little more like, let me just, I don't know if I trust it, like, let me see for a second. And that actually felt a little bit weird at first. I felt like I wasn't finding new sexy tools, but now it feels like peaceful, and I feel good about that. And I feel good about that decision and being a little more judicious, being able to say, cool, no thanks, and not worrying about that FOMO, not worrying about what I'm missing out on, because even Chrome extensions. There are certain Chrome extensions that I love, 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 but only show up here at home on my Chrome browser. And when I get to work, they're gone because they don't, and I'm not using them with students, but there are privacy concerns even with
Yeah.
that. So um it's interesting, and then figuring it out and then wanting to show other people the tools. And that, I like to move fast and work fast, and I speak quickly and I type fast and all those kind of things, but not everyone does. And I forget that saying, oh my gosh, hey, I went to Nectful and I learned about this thing and that can also be overwhelming for colleagues
Yeah.
when they're like, I'm just
Yeah.
focused on getting my grades in and I don't even love our grading software. And like that's a whole different
Right.
technology issue and all those kind of things. That can be a lot.
Right. And people like you and I love to go to conferences. I
Mhm.
have colleagues who are like super strong teachers and they don't love, I mean, they do their PD and they learn and they grow, but
Mhm.
they're not sort of addicted to conferences like you
Mhm.
and I are.
Yeah.
And so they don't always have the brain space to hear all the stories about I learned this and that, and let's try this. Right.
Mhm.
They don't necessarily need that.
Yeah. Well, and it's easy to kind of, when you're so excited to not read the room and you're just like, and then, well, you could. And in my current role now doing instructional and technology support, I like will often kind of monitor myself because I can feel myself going, well, you could do this, this, and this, or you could do this and this. And I'm like, whoop, easy there, Meredith. That was two different solutions. And both of those had like bullet points. So they might not be, and stopping and asking questions and being like, does that make like, do you know what I'm talking, like, do you know where to find that? Do you know what that means? Do you know where it looks like? Not in a condescending way, I hope, but just in a sort of a clarification way, because there are so many tools. It's 2024. We have to do, I mean, teachers have to do more than they ever have and post more things in more places. And we just have our platforms have platforms practically. And it can just be all they have, like you said, all of like the bandwidth they have just to get through the day, take attendance at a decent time, pull up slides, get through a slideshow, make some copies, and they're like, I just can't do it anymore. And that's totally understandable. I understand that. Absolutely. Is there anything that we missed in terms of like language technology? We sort of zoomed way out and then zoomed into some specific things, but I can't think of anything that we missed out on that we had talked about before or that we didn't mention.
Uh yeah, very, very quickly, we talked very little about feedback,
Hmm.
but you and I had talked recently, and you mentioned something about audio feedback. And
Mm,
during the lockdown time and the hybrid time, I was really promoting, hey, here's a way to give audio feedback, give your hands some rest, get your exercise balls, and just
right.
you know, do something to exercise your hands, those squishy things, like
Yeah,
just
absolutely, like the stress balls.
yes, yes, exactly. Right. And do that and then just push the button, give audio feedback. And I sort of forgot about that. But for some teachers who have a lot of feedback to give, giving audio feedback, and a lot like I believe Canvas has an audio feedback um, function. And if they don't, there are other really easy ones to use that are free online.
Right.
And give audio feedback, but then make sure that the kids are doing something with the feedback so that you're not just spinning your wheels, right? If we just give feedback and we don't require learners to do anything with it, then it really isn't feedback, right? It's like if a tree fell in the woods and no one was there to hear it, right?
Right. It's just like grading out loud at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like which
Yeah.
may also have some value, but yeah, but then what? What's your checks and balances? Yeah, I love audio feedback. I find too, so like Google Docs now also has a voice input text function. So it's somewhere around, I'd have to click on it. I have to have it open. It's somewhere. Oh, I think it's insert or view. Of course, I say that and now I'm clicking on it in real time, and it's like watching YouTube in front of the class. All the ads come up, and nothing's what you want. Oh, it's under tools. So it's under tools
Oh,
voice typing. tools and voice typing is fabulous, even if it's just like some thoughts out loud that you copy paste somewhere, but you don't want to be, do that thing where you're like type, 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 or handwrite, handwrite, handwrite. And it's easy for you to talk out loud. They don't hear your voice. It just basically like, puts it into text format. But that's just a faster way, especially if, and again, I took typing class in middle school. Like I did certain things that helped me be a fast typer, and not everyone's that way. Sometimes just typing of the things in the tasks is overwhelming. So
Well, that
like,
might
that's,
be an interesting tool for kids
mhm.
who, right, particularly kids who struggle with the writing, to like, I might try that on with students.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can change the language input. So put it in Spanish and then, see how it recognizes their pronunciation. And it's
Yeah,
super low stakes just in a Google Doc. You can always trash it later and that kind of thing. So that's
love
nice
that.
for feedback. And then, in your LMS, like, can you add a voice note? There's tons of Chrome extensions that do voice notes. You can record, you can even, if it's a slideshow, Google now has in slideshow camera where you can record yourself with the slides. So it's, hearing from you, but also hearing you. I think that's powerful. Even just once a unit or once a chapter, whatever your unit of measure is there. I think that can be really, really cool. And again, like portable in a way that those sit down, my context was always 36 or 37 students. So, if you're sitting down with one trying to conference and what are the other 3 dozen doing? And so that can be also really overwhelming. And then again, people are just like, I'm doing my best. I'm not going to do that. And I get that. So that makes that a little bit easier if you can set aside some of your time, but then not use class time, but it evens out a little bit. Yeah. So many easy now in 2024 ways to use audio feedback, which are really cool because I never would have thought about it before. I would have just written stuff or said stuff, but after having to teach digitally in COVID, I'm like, that was kind of fun. I could just talk it out and move on to the next one. And there you go. Easy peasy.
Yeah, great.
Yay. Well, Tim, thank you so much. I know we talked for a while here, and I hope I didn't take up too much of your evening, but I super appreciate your experience, your context, your friendship, of course. I don't know what the professional word for, I guess, professionalship. I don't know, your colleagueship, but I appreciate all of it, and for being our inaugural episode 1 guest.
This is so much fun. When you
Yay.
ask, listen, anything for Meredith, like absolutely.
I would
Right.
say the same. I'd be like, anything for Tim. What does he need me to do?
Say no to Meredith.
Do something. I'm like, you could ask me to do something ridiculous. I'm like, yes, absolutely. When do you need it? Tuesday? Great. So thank you so much. And we will see everybody back here on the next episode 2 of EdTechWorld. Thanks again, Tim.
You're
And
welcome.
thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.